Thanks everyone for joining us today. The way that I'm going to work this is that I am going to put everyone on mute and then just ask if you have any questions, either write them in the chat or pop your hand up. Emma will keep an eye out just for hands up. And then we'll take some questions at the end if that's okay with everyone. Right, so we are recording today as well, just so that you're aware. Okay, so we will carry on now. So I don't know how aware people are of what's been kind of going on in the apprenticeship space this year. I've waited until now to kind of communicate this because things have been changing quite rapidly. Although we still that a lot that we don't know. But I thought now was an appropriate time to just start to communicate that information to people, because actually it requires people to start making decisions. So what we're going to look at today is I'm going to first of all just look at kind of the background situation and how we've got to where we are today. Then I'll have a look at make a comparison against the current assessment model, and then what it will look like in the future. So I want to talk a little bit about centre assessed assessments, and then just outline our expectations and the possible next steps. So just to provide some background information, so cast your mind back to February, National Apprenticeship Week. That was the week that just kept on giving. The Department for Education announced a number of reforms. Now, we sort of thought that they potentially might be coming, but things had gone very quiet at the back end of 2024, so we sort of thought they'd gone away. And the summary of it is that the Department for Education want to simplify the assessment process. They want to increase completion rates of apprenticeships, and they want to increase accessibility with things like foundation level apprenticeships. And as part of a wider issue is they're looking to address skills gaps that many sectors, including ours, are experiencing. So the way that they're going to do this is by changing the apprenticeship assessment model, and we'll look at what that looks like in a minute. So in addition to this, the Department for Education, they did update their funding rules for this educational year, and with that, the removal of the term endpoint assessment organisation happened, and they now just use the term assessment organisation. So that gives you an indication of the fact that endpoint assessment is looking to, basically they're removing it. And more recently, within the last probably 3 weeks, apprenticeships have been formally passed from the Department for Education to the Department for Work and Pensions. Now, there's a lot of questions around that haven't been addressed yet. So, and what those implications are, so at the moment I can't provide any information on that, but that's notable because it's essentially moving it from that a very central education space into employment space, which is a big thing. I believe actually that apprenticeships did start off over there but were moved across, so now they've gone back. So then off the back of that, Ofqual have formally recognised that any organisation under their regulation will now be known as an awarding organisation. So you can see that we've got two terms in play now. So the term endpoint assessment organisation is going, and you will gradually see that phased out in the language that we're using. But we've got these two terms in that we've got the Department for Education, or whoever is governing us now, we're not entirely sure, are using the term assessment organisation. Ofqual are referring to us as an awarding organisation. So going forward, we will be referring to ourselves as an awarding organisation. So just to make that terminology clear, that if you hear us or anyone else referring to themselves as an awarding organisation, that is basically because that's what Ofqual, if they regulate us, know us as now. So Ofqual have done a really good job in going out to consult with the awarding organisation community on how they're going to regulate these changes. We don't know the outcome of that yet. We're expecting that, I would imagine, October, November time. Ofqual have essentially had this done to them, much like we have had this done to us. So we are now just waiting to find out actually how they're going to move this this new way of delivering apprenticeship assessments forward. Okay, so let's get into what these changes look like. So a very high level comparison, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go in and dive in a little bit deeper with every bit that I sort of pull up. So the current endpoint assessment model. So Skills England and employers design an apprenticeship standard and the assessment plan. There are strict requirements for assessment plans to be followed. So you'll all know that the assessment plan is king and everyone has to follow that. And we're required at the moment to report quite heavily into Ofqual if things aren't followed. And it's a purely awarding organisation assessed model. So essentially, as the assessment organisation, awarding organisation, we are responsible for assessing and marking everything. At the moment, all the assessments happen at the end of the training. So apprentices come through the gateway, and that's when we assess the apprentice's competency. And at the moment, behaviours are assessed as part of the endpoint assessment. So then moving on to what is commonly going to be known as a centre assessed assessment model, because that's easy to say, and this is what we believe is happening, because it's still not always clear in some areas. So Skills England and the employer will essentially write an outline for assessment. Awarding organisations will now be responsible for devising those assessments. The centre, which is a training provider, or awarding organisation, could be responsible for assessing different elements of that apprenticeship. And some of these assessments could happen where appropriate on programme. So during the training element of the apprenticeship. Behaviours. Now, we don't know a lot about this. They haven't said a lot about this, but they are going to be signed off and verified by employers, and we don't believe that they're going to be included in the assessment plans. So, but what that looks like, we're not 100%. We're not sure on yet. They haven't really communicated that in any detail. Okay, so let's just dive into this a little bit more. So let's have a look at what it looks like now, and then we'll look at what we think it's going to look like post reform, And then we're going to dive into those post-reform things in a little bit more detail as well. So at the moment, anyone who's looked at an apprenticeship assessment plan will know that they can be anything between 30 and 50 pages long. I had a quick look at some and actually couldn't believe how long some of them were. Skills England have said that assessment plans are going to be, originally they said they were going to be 2 pages long. They're going to be between 2 and 5 pages long. At the moment, they are written by a group of employers with contributions from endpoint assessment organisations. Post-reform, they are going to be written by Skills England, but in consultation with employers. The assessment methods are going to be listed, but not prescribed. So at the moment, we've got detailed grading descriptors to ensure a consistent approach by all endpoint assessment organisations. Post-reform, there's going to be more freedom for awarding organisations to interpret those assessment plans. And awarding organisations will be designing assessments and grading descriptors based on those learning outcomes. And this is quite an important part of it, is they can use a sampling approach to knowledge and skills, as opposed to, at the moment, we tend to stick more towards a mastery approach, which is where we assess every single knowledge, skill and behaviour. The view is that it will move to a more sampling. So and we wouldn't necessarily sample every knowledge and skill, but what we sample from apprentice to apprentice will be different. At the moment, we've got these very strict protocols around following assessment plans, whereas because we'll have such a lighter touch assessment plan post-reform, we'll still have to follow something strictly, but it will be more around the assessments that we design as awarding organisations, as opposed to what's in the assessment plans, because they're such light touch. At the moment, awarding organisations must assess all knowledge, skills and behaviours at the end of the apprenticeship, so after Gateway. So of course, this means that Gateway will no longer be there. So assessments can happen on programme in addition to any assessments that might actually happen at the end of the training element. And at the moment, all assessments must be independently marked by the awarding organisation. So this is potentially one of the biggest possible changes, is that awarding organisations will be able to determine if centres, so training providers, can deliver any of the assessments, so essentially mark them on our behalf. And that's subject to a lot of conditions. Okay, so let's just dive into some of those post-reform notes. So firstly, around 2 to 5 pages long, these new assessment plans. Initially, they said they were going to be 2 pages. We now believe that they've realised that's impossible, but we don't know, because we've not seen any of these assessment plans yet. We're waiting with bated breath to see what they look like. At the moment, we've seen some foundation level new style assessment plans. So we're basing what we think they're going to look like on that. And they have released kind of a structure, but in terms of actually how many pages that's going to be, we don't know. But I mean, to give you an indication of, so to go from between 30 and 50 pages for an assessment plan down to potentially 2 to 5 pages, I mean, that is stripping an awful lot out. I mean, there is a lot of repetition in these assessment plans anyway. So then, written by Skills England in consultation with a group of employers. So the assessment methods will be listed but not prescribed. So breaking that down, again, we've not had a lot of information on this, but what we believe is that Skills England are still going to talk to employers, but it does feel a bit like they're kind of taking away some of that control that employers had on deciding what was best for their sector. But we believe they will identify what they think assessment methods should be, but there'll be nothing around timings and which KSBs will be assigned to those assessment methods. So we think there is going to be more freedom for awarding organisations to interpret assessment plans. So what we're going to be required to do essentially is to develop assessments a bit more in line with how qualifications are currently developed. So we will have to write a very detailed assessment strategy, which will require us to consult with employers. It will require us to detail why we've made specific decisions about the allocations of knowledge and skills, timings, why we've decided not to do certain things. So essentially, it's almost taken, if you think it took Leah and the employer group 3 years to review the 252 standard, a lot of that work that was done within that employer group will kind of move across to the awarding organisation to have control of. So there is actually a lot more work for us as an awarding organisation. So awarding organisations will design assessments and grading descriptors based on learning outcomes and can sample knowledge, skills and behaviours. So as I've said, this is going to require us to consult with the sector, especially on those grading descriptors. Obviously, we'll be working with sector experts, as we already do, to design our assessments. But we need to demonstrate that we've had stakeholder involvement when we've been designing our assessments. So at the moment, there's no actual requirement for us to demonstrate that engagement when we design our assessments. It's good practice, but it's not actually a requirement, whereas this will actually be a requirement. We'll need to have all of this in our design files that we've had we've sent our assessments out for consultation, for people's feedback, and that we know that they're fit for purpose. So the assessments can be on programme either by the centre or awarding organisation. So we need to be quite clear about this, and I think this is the area that caused quite a lot of stir when initially we heard it was coming out. We were quite concerned that it was, what actually was that going to look like? Were they not going to need us as an assessment organisation anymore? And the model they've settled on is one which I think we're probably more comfortable with, but we need to explain it to providers and employers for them to understand. So this is what we're trying to do today. So as an awarding organisation, we will specify when and how the assessments can be delivered, and whether or not we will if we permit centres to deliver them, we need them, essentially they need to be approved by us, and then we'll make the decision on whether or not they can deliver assessments, and then we'll tell them what the assessments are going to be. So it isn't just a free-for-all. It's not a case of, okay, well, training providers can take over the assessments. So then let's just dive into this assessment part of things in a little bit more detail now. So at the moment, assessments are delivered at the end of the apprenticeship. So post-reform, the assessments can be delivered at any appropriate point in the apprenticeship. At the moment, all assessments are carried out by the endpoint assessment organisation. Post-reform, some assessments can be carried out by the training provider. And I apologise if this sounds a bit repetitive, but I'm trying to just drill into the detail and pick it apart and make it very clear. So at the moment, broadly speaking, all endpoint assessment organisations deliver a similar assessment in line with the assessment plan. After the reforms, it's highly likely that assessments could vary between awarding organisations. So if you use potentially multiple awarding organisations for your assessments on one standard, maybe, those assessments could look different. At the moment, assessments are carried out by an independent endpoint assessment organisation appointed assessor. In theory, post-reform, some of the assessments could be carried out by the on-programme trainer or assessor, subject to our approval as the awarding organisation. And obviously at the moment, assessments include behaviours. Post-reform, the assessments will no longer include behaviours. Employers will be responsible for signing these off. So if we just look at this in a little bit more detail, some of those points. So the assessments can be delivered at any appropriate point in the assessment. It is complex and there is a lot more to come on this, but at a very high level, as an awarding organisation, we will still decide when it would be appropriate to deliver certain assessments. It's not just a free rein to sort of carry them out when desired by a training provider. But some of those assessments can be carried out by the training provider, but, and this is also key, this can be provider elected. There's still a requirement for a minimum of 40% to be carried out by the awarding organisation. But a training provider doesn't actually have to carry out any. If you think I haven't got the resource, I kind of like the way it's delivered at the moment, then you don't have to carry out elements of it. And equally, as an awarding organisation, I believe it is in our remit to make the decision that we don't think it's appropriate. And that could be for a particular centre, if we deem them to be too high risk, or just for a particular standard if we think that it's not appropriate. Again, all this is still evolving, so we're still trying to get a handle on what is and isn't acceptable or expected. So the assessments could vary between awarding organisations, and again, this is something which doesn't sit very well with us. It doesn't sit well with most of the awarding organisations out there. Consistency. Now, we believe that assessments will be recommended. So they might say, we recommend a knowledge test or an observation, but we're not sure at the moment whether or not that's a recommended or you must. So there could be different types of assessments. They could vary in length, and the types of questions could be different. And the allocation of, the knowledge and skills, not the behaviours, that's not going to be there, but they could be different. So you could find one awarding organisation delivering endpoint assessment for a standard does it one way, and another awarding organisation for the same standard delivers it in a different way. That's a real concern that pretty much every awarding organisation has got around that consistency and that consistent approach for training providers, for you to manage that, and for that consistent approach for apprentices as well, to make sure everyone's being assessed on a level playing field. And so then assessments could be carried out by the on-programme trainer assessor. So in order for this to happen, and again, they've not really clarified this, so providers will need to have a suitable quality assurance strategy in place to manage this. So essentially at the moment, I guess if anyone has approval with awarding organisations or is part of the LEA qualification centre at the moment as a satellite centre, it will be that sort of quality assurance model that you'll need to have in place. And essentially, LEA is going to be acting like an external quality assurer. So we'll be coming in and sampling that activity. And there is something called a CAS strategy, which I'm not going to go into too much detail because at the it's not something you need to know about at the moment, but it is called a Centre Assessment Scrutiny Strategy, which basically is a handbook of how we are going to manage centres, basically, and how we're going to do all the sampling. And on to the last point, assessments will no longer include behaviours. So we have talked about this. So employers will be responsible for signing them off. But again, I don't know what that looks like. I don't believe they're going to be listed in the assessment plans at all. I don't know. We assume they're still going to be in the standard, but we don't know whether or not an employer is going to have to declare through the training provider that they're happy, and then we use that as part of our certification claim. We have no idea, but but just to reiterate that point, but again, what that looks like, we have no clue at the moment. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the centre assessed model in some more detail. So training providers will need to become centres of LEA. And you're going to need to apply for this. This is regardless of your trading history and experience with us. And this is in no way linked to anything to do with the LEA Qualification Centre. It will be a similar experience, but it's not linked to that at all, because obviously that comes through EAL. And that's got nothing to do with apprenticeships. Training providers will need to comply with the centre approval requirements, which will have an added layer of due diligence. So there'll be a centre approval requirements which will be set by us. LEA will design and set all assessment activities, even the ones that might be delivered by the centres. Training providers will need to demonstrate how they will internally quality assure their assessments. See that as part of the CAS that I talked about. LEA will operate an external quality assurance model whereby we will risk rate centres and sample assessments prior to certification claims. So for anyone who works with awarding organisations on qualifications, you'll have heard or may have heard of something called direct claim status. It's our understanding, and again, we don't know because Ofqual will need to tell us this. We believe that we will be required to sample activities prior to assessment claims. Whereas at the moment with qualifications, centres risk, if risk sits at green, they can be granted something called direct claim status, which essentially means that they can claim their certificates themselves. We believe that we're still claiming the certificates as the awarding organisation, but we don't know that for certain yet. So again, that's something we'll have to clarify a little bit later down the line. We do not see a reduction in the cost of the assessment due to the increased burden of external quality assurance that we're going to have and the additional development costs. And actually, we've had some conflicting information from the Department for Education on whether or not they're going to review funding. Are they going to look at funding bans for apprenticeships? Someone from DFE said that wouldn't be happening. They're not looking to do that. But then someone else from DFE said that they will be looking at reviewing funding bans. So no idea. And as soon as we know more, we'll let you know. But it is certainly going to be more expensive for us to deliver and develop these things because of the amount of work that's essentially being put upon us. We don't believe that employers and behaviours will fall under the remit of us as a awarding organisation, but again, we don't know. We're not quite sure how this is going to work. So we think that because what we don't want is to have employers as centres. It doesn't make any sense. So that's another big question that we're waiting for answers on.
Oh, Karen, Mark's got his hand up.
Okay, I'll take a question at the end if that's okay. So we're nearly there anyway. So expectations and next steps. So there is the option for providers on whether or not they wish to take the centre assessed route. You don't have to. You may wish. What you probably need to go away and do now is to consult with your employers and have conversations internally about what you think the best route is for you and your customers. We just want to make it clear, though, that for us, there is no option on the additional work that we need to do. We still need, even if you decide not to do it, and it might be that one provider decides that they do want to offer that, and another provider decides that actually they want to keep it as it is, and we have to have those options available unless we make the blanket overall decision to not, that we don't need, it's not appropriate for centre assessed assessments, but we haven't got that far yet in our development to having made that consideration. What we're looking for is a steer from the providers in the sector about what they think is appropriate for them, because that will steer us on potentially some of the decisions we make and the work that we do. So the gap between an assessment only awarding organisation and a full awarding organisation is essentially being narrowed because of the decisions that government has made. Going forward, we want providers and employers to consider your wider qualification needs and possible opportunities that might bring. On the 21st of October, we are going to share with you our possible next steps. Would really like that if any interested stakeholders could support that and attend. And when if you come to that, bring that information above about actually, what opportunities are there for more qualifications, training, and how you think as a training provider or in consultation with the employers how you see it working for you and your business. So Ofqual have yet to publish the results of their consultation. So as I've said, we aren't fully aware of the expectations on us as an awarding organisation. In terms of timeframes, Skills England have not fully committed to a timeframe for all this to be implemented. We think 12 to 18 months, but I mean, how long is a piece of string? There's about 700 assessment plans that need reviewing. So, but what we can say is that we will communicate any information with you. What we'll probably do is do another one of these sessions when we've got kind of more detailed information on more areas to share with you. Okay, so I'm now opening the floor to questions. I will start with Mark because you had your hand up.
Thanks for that, Karen. I guess more questions than answers, really. Still, very typical government initiative. Doesn't come as a great surprise. I actually had a call with apprenticeship manager from Skills England last week because we feel that our apprenticeship standard is woefully underfunded, and it's presenting all sorts of problems from a delivery perspective.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting because on the call, the apprenticeship manager was talking about the huge task that they're currently undertaking to review the endpoint assessments. And he suggested that one of the solutions might be to remove more of the funding from the endpoint assessment organisation and give it to the training provider, at which point I pointed out to him that if you do choose to do that, then particularly where apprenticeships such as ours in a very niche specialised area probably push the endpoint assessment organisations out, resulting in zero apprenticeships for the industry. So yeah. I think it's a real concern for me, these changes that they're talking about introducing. It feels to me like they're just doing it to boost numbers for a statistical perspective and not really in the interest of the apprentices or the employers for which the apprenticeships apply. Yeah,
I mean, it's
mind boggles.
Yeah, I mean, there are many opinions, and at the end of the day, it makes no difference. As a awarding and assessment community, we try to work with obviously the Labour government came in. We tried to work with the Department for Education and try to provide that feedback. And then they essentially made these decisions and disregarded a lot of the information. And, you know, again, and it just demonstrates that that inconsistent approach, because if you've spoken to Skills England and they're talking about removing some of the funding from the awarding organisations, I mean, that's certainly, we've had different responses from the Department for Education, and obviously now, because the Education Skills Funding Agency is now gone, that's now been taken back into the Department for Education, but actually now the Department for Education have moved apprenticeships over the Department for Work and Pensions. So, but we've not heard anything from them yet. So we have literally no idea what's going on with funding, how we're going to claim certificates. Who do we claim certificates from? Because at the moment we log on to a Department for Education portal, and it all comes through that. So it's at points is quite overwhelming at the amount of questions that remain unanswered for us. Dave, you have your hand up. You're on mute, Dave.
I just wanted to add, because I was at the conference last week and there were quite a few provider speakers who were also mentioning that they didn't see prices coming down from an endpoint assessment delivery point of view, because of the more quality assurance going to have to be put into this process as well. The Ofqual was there and there was no mention of price reductions from them either, although they wasn't saying much about things that's happening, because there's still a lot of things in the pipeline that they've got to bring up and discuss at future meetings. So I think the consensus around the room was that prices will probably stay the same.
Yeah, but again, but you've got that inconsistent approach, haven't you? And this is one of the frustrating things is that still now you have no consistent joint up approach for Skills England, Ofqual and Department for Education, Department for Work and Pensions. There's no single lined up approach. And Ofqual, I will give them, Ofqual have been very good. They've done so far, they've managed this very, very well. And it feels like they're the only people giving awarding organisations a voice at the moment. So, but I mean, this session is more about communicating those changes. There's not a huge amount we can do to change it now. So it's about communicating those changes and just making sure that people know what's coming down the line. Have we got any more questions? We haven't. Has everyone just been stunned into silence? Oh, Dave's got his hand up. I can't see you, Dave, but yes, please talk.
Yeah, where's the money gone, Karen?
Where's the money gone? What do you mean?
Yeah, all the employers' money, you know. One of the questions I asked right at the beginning when Skills England took over, the drawdown money, you know, the money that was in the pot. Do you remember?
Yeah.
One of my first questions when Skills England took over, there was a money that all the employers had put down from their drawdown sort of money, their apprentice pot, as it were. So has that been ring fenced for use by the employers again that contributed to it? Because it's not their money, it's the employers' money.
As far as we're aware, that's not changing. So the levy's still in place and you will still have apprenticeships for levy paying employers will be funded via the levy. And then apprenticeships for non-levy paying employers will come from the adult education budget. And that will be co-funded for any apprentices who are over the age of 18. So we don't believe that that's changing.
Okay,
So that's something.
that's something.
Yeah,
There's something we know, other than all the things we don't know.
indeed. Yes, quite. So,
Okay.
okay. Have we got any more questions? If not, we can draw to a close a little bit early. I just wanted to give provide enough time so that if there were questions that I'd given enough time for it. What I will say is obviously, if anyone does have any questions they don't want to ask publicly on here, then you're more than welcome to drop us an email, or we can have a Teams meeting or something, because you know there will be questions, I'm sure. If some of you will have seen the invite come out for the 21st of October around the Ording Organisation meeting. I would encourage people to get someone from their organisation to attend if they can, or forward it on to someone. If you haven't had it and you'd like to, if you just get in contact with us, then we can add you onto the meeting link. Let me double check. So there's nothing else in the chat, is there? No. Okay. Well, if everyone is, if no one's got anything else that they want to share or ask, then I'll call this session to a close. And it has been recorded, so if anyone wants to record it, and I can circulate the slides out if anyone wants them as well. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.